On September 26, 2025, the U.S. Supreme Court delivered a landmark decision, striking down the Trump administration's sweeping tariffs imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. This ruling came after years of heated legal battles and intense public debate, with the nation's highest court finally weighing in on the limits of presidential power in economic affairs. The justices declared these tariffs an unlawful overreach of presidential authority, setting a powerful precedent for how far the executive branch can go in shaping trade policy without congressional approval. The ruling dismantles a cornerstone of the administration's aggressive trade strategy, sending shockwaves through Wall Street and global markets. Investors scrambled to reassess their positions, as uncertainty rippled across financial centers from New York to London and Shanghai. For years, American businesses and consumers have faced volatile import taxes, justified as protection for U.S. industries, but hotly contested in courts. Many companies struggled with unpredictable costs, while shoppers saw prices rise on everyday goods, fueling frustration and debate nationwide. The court's decision validates critics who argued the president misused emergency powers for trade policy, forcing a national reckoning on executive authority. Legal scholars and activists now see this as a turning point in the ongoing debate over checks and balances in American government. By striking down the IEEPA tariffs, the court draws a clear line. Future presidents can't bypass Congress to impose broad economic measures. This decision reaffirms the vital role of legislative oversight in shaping the nation's economic destiny. This isn't just about tariffs, it's about the constitutional balance of power and the rules that govern global commerce. The decision will likely influence how the U.S. negotiates and enforces trade agreements for years to come. While businesses celebrate relief from high costs, the administration signals it will pivot to other legal avenues to continue its protectionist agenda. The White House has already hinted at new strategies, ensuring the debate over America's trade future is far from over. The world now watches as America's trade policy enters a new, uncertain chapter, with allies and rivals alike bracing for the next move in this high-stakes global drama. President Trump's trade strategy relied on tariffs to pressure countries like China, the EU, and India into better deals. To bypass Congress, the administration invoked IEEPA, a law meant for true emergencies, not routine trade disputes. Historically, IEEPA targeted foreign threats, not trade deficits. But the administration declared a national emergency over trade imbalances, using the act to impose sweeping tariffs. This legal maneuver allowed rapid escalation in trade wars, but drew immediate legal challenges from businesses and critics. Opponents argued IEEPA was never intended as a general tariff tool, and that only Congress can set tax policy. Thousands of companies sued, claiming the tariffs were illegal and financially damaging. The stage was set for a high-stakes Supreme Court showdown over the limits of presidential economic power. The outcome would redefine how and who sets America's trade policy. The legal battle over IEEPA tariffs began in the U.S. Court of International Trade, where businesses argued the president had overstepped his authority. The court agreed, ruling that IEEPA wasn't a shortcut for imposing tariffs. Congress had already set clear rules for trade. The government appealed, but the Federal Appeals Court upheld the decision, stating the president couldn't use IEEPA to levy broad tariffs. However, the tariffs stayed in place temporarily, pending Supreme Court review. The White House insisted it would prevail, framing the issue as a test of legitimate presidential power. The central question: can a president declare a trade imbalance a national emergency and tax Americans without Congress? The Supreme Court's decision to fast-track the case underscored its national importance. Today's ruling delivers a definitive answer on the boundaries of executive economic authority. Anticipating legal defeat on IEEPA, the administration pivoted to Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. Section 232 lets the president impose tariffs on imports deemed threats to national security, a much harder legal wall for opponents to climb. Courts have historically deferred to presidential judgment on national security, making Section 232 tariffs tough to challenge. The administration has already used this authority to slap steep tariffs on steel, aluminum, and copper, citing defense needs. Now, the Commerce Department is investigating a growing list of imports, from semiconductors to pharmaceuticals, under the national security banner. Trade experts warn this shift could make protectionist tariffs more permanent and far-reaching. Section 232's broad scope means many U.S. imports could face heavy taxes, escalating global trade tensions. The legal battle over tariffs is far from over, only the battlefield has changed. U.S. tariff policy has dramatically transformed the economic landscape, raising the average effective tariff rate from just 2% to over 17% by 2025. This sharp increase marks one of the most significant shifts in trade policy in recent history, affecting nearly every sector of the economy and altering the way American businesses operate. The Treasury collected a staggering $213 billion in tariffs this year alone, with monthly records shattered as new duties took effect. This surge in revenue was initially seen as a windfall for government coffers, fueling debates about the true cost and benefit of tariffs. Despite claims that foreign countries pay these tariffs, the reality is that the costs fall squarely on U.S. importers and ultimately on American consumers. Higher prices at the checkout line, from groceries to electronics, have become a daily reality for millions, squeezing household budgets and fueling inflation. The Supreme Court's recent ruling will slash the average tariff rate, potentially boosting GDP by $95 billion annually. Economists predict that this decision could spark renewed growth, increase competitiveness, and help restore confidence in the U.S. market. Lower import taxes could ease inflation and provide much-needed relief to American households, making everyday goods more affordable and helping families recover from years of rising costs. But the government now faces the daunting task of refunding billions in unlawfully collected tariffs, a major fiscal headache that will require extensive administrative effort and careful financial planning. The episode exposes the risks of using emergency powers for economic policy, turning what was supposed to be a revenue boost into a massive payout, and raising questions about the long-term consequences of such decisions. Even as the IEEPA tariffs fall, the economic disruptions of the trade wars linger. Factories have closed, supply chains have shifted, and many workers remain uncertain about the future. The story of tariffs is now one of both relief and reckoning, as the nation grapples with the aftermath and looks ahead to a new chapter in economic policy. The Trump-era tariffs rippled from U.S. store shelves to factories abroad, raising costs and uncertainty for businesses and consumers. Small and medium-sized companies struggled most, forced to absorb higher costs or pass them to customers. For Americans, tariffs meant a steady rise in everyday prices, tightening household budgets. The Supreme Court's decision promises some relief, but Section 232 tariffs keep many products expensive. Internationally, the U.S. used IEEPA tariffs as leverage, straining relations with partners like India. India faced not only tariffs but also the loss of key trade waivers, complicating its strategic interests. Now, with IEEPA tariffs gone, India still faces Section 232 barriers, especially in steel, aluminum, and pharmaceuticals. The trade war's legacy is ongoing uncertainty and new disputes at the World Trade Organization. Trade experts see the Supreme Court's decision as a vital check on executive power, a move that reaffirms the importance of legal boundaries in shaping U.S. trade policy. However, they also warn that this ruling introduces a new set of risks and uncertainties for the global trading system, as the balance of power continues to shift. Deborah Elms of the Heinrich Foundation highlights the administration's pivot to Section 232, describing it as a more entrenched and legally resilient form of protectionism. She explains that Section 232, which allows the president to impose tariffs on the grounds of national security, is now being used more aggressively, making it harder for courts or Congress to intervene. Courts rarely challenge presidential claims of national security, making Section 232 tariffs nearly untouchable. Legal experts point out that this deference to the executive branch means that, in practice, the president's authority over trade can be almost absolute when national security is invoked. This creates deep uncertainty for global businesses, as almost any product could be targeted. Companies are left guessing which industries might be affected next, complicating long-term planning and investment decisions in an already volatile global market. Greg IP notes that upholding IEEPA tariffs would have handed presidents sweeping new powers to tax under the guise of emergencies. He emphasizes that such unchecked authority could have set a precedent for future administrations to bypass Congress whenever they deemed it necessary. Peter Harrell warns that normalizing emergency economic powers could lead to radical interventions, like carbon or digital taxes, without Congress. He cautions that this could fundamentally alter the way economic policy is made in the United States, shifting more power to the executive branch and away from democratic oversight. The Supreme Court closed the door on IEPA overreach, but Section 232 keeps the debate over executive economic power alive. Legal scholars and policymakers continue to grapple with where the line should be drawn between necessary executive action and overreach. The future of U.S. trade policy remains uncertain and fiercely contested, with experts agreeing that the next chapter will be shaped by ongoing legal battles, shifting political priorities, and the evolving landscape of global commerce. The Supreme Court's ruling is more than a trade dispute, it's a defining moment for presidential power. By striking down IEPA tariffs, the court reasserts Congress's authority over trade and taxation. Yet as one avenue narrows, another widens. Section 232 gives presidents broad leeway to act in the name of national security. This paradox means future presidents could use security claims to justify sweeping economic interventions. The precedent set today could empower any administration to reshape the economy without Congress. The era will be remembered for testing and redefining the boundaries of executive power. The IEPA ruling is a win for limited government, but Section 232's rise shows the executive branch's adaptability. America's economic future now hinges on how these powers are wielded. The Supreme Court's decision is a landmark, echoing through households, boardrooms, and international summits. By reaffirming Congress's role in trade and taxation, the court sparks a national debate on the limits of executive power. The ruling forces us to ask, what is a real emergency? When should a president wield extraordinary authority? The answers will shape America's economic future and its place in the world. Tariff policy is no longer an abstract issue. It affects the price of goods, jobs, and global relationships. Staying informed and engaged is now essential for every citizen. As the administration pivots and the world reacts, the story of global trade is still being written. The gavel has fallen, but the conversation and the consequences are just beginning.